Alrighty, guys. Welcome to another episode of Comic Book Junkies. Today we got me
I'm Burger.
and my brother Juan. Welcome to the cast, Juan.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Little background on CBJ. You were actually one of the original members of Comic Book Junkies. It was an idea that the three of us had a very long time ago, and I even think you helped come up with the name. I think that was your idea, and we tried to get something together and scheduling conflicts and everything. But anyways, we're here now. We got you on the cast. So I guess a good place to start. What got you into comic books, and was there anybody that kind of inspired you along the way to continue or keep collecting?
Yes, I can remember distinctly a guy named Dan, and shit, how old was I? I was probably like 13, 14, and Dan was an altar boy at the Catholic church that my stepfather, Joe's father, would drag me to occasionally. And I came to realize that the altar boy I recognized from school, and also realized that he lived not too far from my house. And so one day, being, I don't know, the 13-year-old kid that I walked over to his house, and he was really into comic books. And he showed me some comics that he had. And I'll tell a little bit of more of a kind of a weird story about Dan later in comics. But so Dan turned me on the comic books, and the fact that he started collecting got me into collecting. And I think like the very next day, I walked over to 7-Eleven, and I remember the very first issue or first comic that I ever like sought out to start collecting was Web of Spider-Man number 64. It was on a spinner rack at the local 7-Eleven, and it was like I was hooked. Spider-Man beating people up and cracking jokes and having girl trouble, and I was just like, this shit's for me. And I wasn't very popular in school, so comics kind of became like an escape for me in a way. And the fact that my new friend Dan collected just kind of like, I don't know, all kind of coalesced together.
My friend Dan, the altar boy, I wasn't super cool. Just kidding. But that's cool that you had somebody like Dan around, you know, like regardless of how tight you were with Dan prior, or, you know, if you just saw him from across the church, you're like, that guy looks cool. And, you know, one thing led to another, and he introduced you to comics. Like, that's cool that, you know, somebody did that for you. That's kind of how Joe got me into it, was just like, you know, you get shown through a friend, and, you know, that's cool.
Sounds like Dan's a pretty cool dude.
Right?
When's the last time you talked to Dan?
Oh gosh, I mean, legitimately talked to him probably like 5 years. He lives in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, and we went and visited him about 5 years ago. You know, obviously, like, I'm friends on social media and stuff, but I don't really consider that a conversation of sorts. But yeah, so that started, and then I've been collecting now for like 30 years. Before we jumped on this podcast, I had mentioned to the guys, the junkies, that I was cleaning out my basement, and I guesstimated that I have about 10,000 floppies sitting down there. So
Jesus Christ.
That's crazy, I feel bad. Man.
I feel bad for whoever has to clean that shit up after I die.
Do you though? It's probably gonna be me. Oh, that's too funny. So 30 years, huh? I'd hope your collection's better than Dan's.
Actually, I bought Dan's collection at one point. So.
Anything good?
Yes. Okay, so here's that little weird offshoot story. So as we got older, and as we became weirder and more...
What do you mean?
And became more like outcasts in school, we would like hit up the local comic book stores in the area, and Dan was not afraid to steal comics.
What an altar boy.
That's
Right?
not very Catholic of him.
There was this one shop in particular. It was more of a bookstore than anything, but the guy, we nicknamed him Val because he seemed like he was on Valium. He's like this sleepy shopkeeper. He would get up occasionally, we'd be talking to him, and then he would go in the back room, and then sure as shit, Dan would go behind the counter and throw some comics under his shirt. And I know he picked up a Deadpool and some other stuff. So it was right around that era of like when Image first started coming out, I think, roughly. So, or just before that.
Pretty delinquent. What type
I've never stolen a comic book, even though I've wanted to.
What else has Dan stolen? Did he steal the host at like Mass too? Did he pocket a few of those? Like, what? I'm taking the wine back home.
I've had some unsavory friends, that's for sure.
Don't trust the altar boys.
All right.
But, I'm gonna like ask you. So, I mean, you mentioned Image stuff. You know, your friend liked to pocket some like Deadpool type stuff. You mentioned you picked up Spider-Man at first. Like, what did you start heavily reading like when you first started? And do you still read that kind of stuff now, or do you have like an entirely different taste, or like what characters, what kind of titles, genres? Like, what tickles your fancy?
Well, okay, so definitely my tastes have refined over the years for sure. But I was a typical superheroes, Marvel, DC when I first started. At 13, you don't know jack shit about much, right? And so most of the comics that I was getting right from the start were like spinner rack stuff. So it was inconsistent. And then I'd say probably like within that year, I discovered, oh, you can get a pull at a local comic book store and there's ordering and blah, blah, blah. And so my original pull was probably like mostly Marvel, talking like Web of Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man, all the Spider-Man, Spectacular Spider-Man at the time, Wolverine, X-Men, ton of like that Marvel Punisher stuff, and then probably a smattering of some DC like Batman, Detective. I was never really heavily into Superman, although I always appreciated the sort of like the Trinity or the DC characters. You know, it's interesting because before collecting comics, I was definitely influenced by campy television shows like the Adam West Batman and the Linda Carter Wonder Woman and like the live action Spider-Man movies and shit. And so Batman for sure. And there was just a lot of like DC toys in my life, I feel like, and like DC branded things. Like I remember having a little like 45 vinyl record carrying case that had like all the superheroes, DC superheroes on it and stuff. Shit, I went through a box tonight and found a Batman Avon brush, like a hairbrush.
You gonna use it?
I looked at it fondly and then put it back in the box. You know, and then, you know, over the years I started reading some graphic novels, and so Dark Knight Returns and Watchmen, and started to, I would say, like, it's an expensive hobby. Let's just put it this way. So my pulls would get like out of control, and then I would cut them back. And then there was like a long time when I was in graduate school where I wasn't collecting. And then the new 52 came out, and I was like, okay, I'm going to get back in. And so at that point, it was like, comic pulls had like evolved. And so you could just get the whole sort of like release of like all 52 titles basically in one pull. So, and then it was like, oh, now they have like alternate covers and variants and shit like that. And then so I kind of got sucked into that and trying to like speculate and buy comics that I thought would kind of increase in value, even though I would get my like collection, and then I would try to like get some variant type stuff on the side. And then I started getting more back into like modern Image stuff. So, and Dark Horse, things like that. Like I really liked Saga, Mind Management, those kind of things. You know, I just recently stopped collecting probably within like the last year in terms of like getting a pull. And at that point I was doing online mail order. And now I am just selective. So I just look for keys, which is kind of what you guys helped turn me on to. I've collected for so long and had so many floppies that sort of indirectly had some keys, but I've kind of changed the way I collect now and sort of more selective and kind of seek things out, conventions when there isn't a raging pandemic. So
it's still expensive, but it is a good way to cut to the chase so that you're not spending money on stuff that depreciates rather. Because you can go to like a lot of antique stores and see people dump off their big comic collection, and 9 out of 10 times there's nothing really to thumb through there. It's just a bunch of 90s books or variants. We definitely look for like key issues, is what you would call them, or first appearances of characters. I would imagine that was kind of harder for you to do back in the day, because on the internet, there's a bunch of different sites and Instagram and stuff like that, where it's just like, these are the comic book key issues that you should get for the Bronze Age, the Silver Age. But when you were collecting, I would imagine you would just have to go to the comic book stores and kind of like see themes as to like what books are selling well. Like how would you find out what to collect, or did you just do what you were interested in?
I would get the previews, thumb through that, and then just hang out in the store. And I have to tell you, some of those shopkeepers are assholes.
Most.
Sure.
No kidding, dude.
That's a problem with at least the scene in like Southeast Michigan. Sorry to cut you off, but it's just like you can go to like store after store, and granted, there's nowhere near as many as there used to be in the early 2000s, the 90s, you know, when things were still popping. But it's just like you go to what's left, and the guys are either very indifferent that you're in there when it's like, you know how thin the margins are in this store. You need me, sir. And then it's just like the other guys are kind of assholes. They're just like, no, we're not giving you $5 off. You can get the fuck out of my store. It's like, I don't get where like the sensibilities are. I mean, my local comic shop that I go to, they kick ass like customer service wise in most degrees. But it's just like, I don't get how some of the like, they kind of are like the stereotypical like Simpsons comic book guy. And he's just like, what do you mean this isn't a first appearance? And it's just like, bro, get out of here. I'm not trying to beef with you. I'm just trying to pick up my pull. And it's just like, leave me alone. I don't care that I didn't like The Last Jedi. And no, I'm not going to go see the new Thor movie. Leave me alone. And it's just like try to gatekeep you being a nerd, and it's just like, I don't want to be you. Just let me buy my shit and go.
Yeah,
but
they're really judgmental. Yeah, and that's the thing. Like, I do remember the first, I guess, keys that I picked up were the 4-part Wolverine miniseries.
Nice. Miller?
Yes, and that was at my local comic book shop. And it was hit or miss. Like the actual owners, they were okay, but the people they hired to run the the day-to-day operations, those were the a-holes. And I guess looking back, it's probably because they were paid jack shit and then had to pull my comic books. Like, who the fuck reads Submariner?
Word. That being said, do you have a favorite character or like a favorite series that you've read?
All-time favorite character is Batman. I know it's lame to say, but there will always be a special place for Spidey, just because that's what I cut my teeth on. Marvel definitely has the weirder characters that I really like the Punisher and like sort of like the supporting characters like Microchip and shit like that. My favorite mini series is like this 12-part maxi called Fool Killer that I just really loved. Gosh, I don't know. And then I think probably my last 2 favorite comics that I was reading were probably Black Hammer and Saga.
Nice. So, I mean, it sounds like if Batman's your favorite character, but it sounds like a lot of the titles you mentioned were Marvel. And I know that we like both here, but do you skew a preference towards Marvel in general or DC, or are you like directly down the middle? Because obviously I like both, but I would say that I'm more of a DC guy. Even though you have your allegiance to Batman, are you more of a Marvel guy?
No, I'm right down the middle. I like DC for the multiverse aspect of it, and I love Marvel. And I know Marvel has done their own version, right? They always do their own version of DC. I love Marvel just for their quirky weirdness. Because it's just like in Marvel, it's like the characters have like, this is really Stan Lee-ish, but like they have the same type of problems that I have, in a lot of ways. DC also had like a line of Westerns that I really liked. I don't know. I'm all over the place. I like it all. I think movie wise, like the Christian Bale Batman with like really nailed it for me in terms of like, oh, this is what I want my comic. And I know this isn't a popular opinion, but I really like the Watchmen movie. I like the Watchmen series. And don't get me wrong, I watched all of the Marvel movies with the exception of Captain Marvel. Like I could only get like 3/4 of the way through. And it had nothing to do with like I didn't like actors or anything. Like it's just the story just was boring to me. And so I don't know, like movie wise, even though the DC are kind of like shittier, I still like them better.
I think they do a better job with their animated stuff and the stuff that's not trying to be tied into like a single universe. Because like the Christian Bale Batman stuff isn't a part of like their their Suicide Squad or any of that stuff. And so, or like the Joker seems pretty separate from, like the Wonder Woman movie and all that stuff. So
yeah.
I do think they do a better job with their one-offs than Marvel, but Marvel does a better job with the movies as far as like creating like a universe. So I think they should just do what they're good at, not trying to copy Marvel in the movie industry and just kind of do their like one-offs or whatever works best for them.
And that's why I love the multiverse so much, because you can have those differing stories and they don't have to tie in, right? That's the great thing about DC. It's like you can have a fucking Gotham by Gaslight, it's just, it doesn't have to be like thematically tied into like a cinematic universe. And I tried giving WandaVision a try last night and I was like, not my cup of tea.
No.
I haven't tried it yet, but it didn't look basic.
Like I maybe watched too much Leave It to Beaver back in the day or something. Yeah, I don't know. Like I loved comics, but how about that?
Well, what's your favorite creative team, artist or writer?
Whoa, I guess Alan Moore is probably my favorite writer.
Good choice.
I also like that he's just like fucking weird as hell. Grant Morrison. I like the far out people. I like Neil Gaiman. I don't know. I've been watching American Gods recently and I really like that. So I feel like there was something else. Oh, it's not really. So Conan the Barbarian, books, magazines, then like makes the jump to comics. But I was thinking about this earlier in terms of like, if they asked me about like movies and stuff. So the original Arnold Conan the Barbarian movie is still at the top of my list as a fucking awesome movie.
That's really cool. I respect that. Yeah, you kind of changed the game for a lot of things, Well,
and it's like I saw that shit when I was like 10 years old, maybe. Like a 10-year-old. If you go back and watch Conan the Barbarian right now, you're like, how is this not rated X? In many ways. I mean, there's rape, it's misogynistic beyond belief, but I remember in particular the scene where he's having sex with the witch and throws her in the fire and then she just laughs and like runs off. I was like, oh shit, like what am I watching, Dad? Like my 10-year-old brain had trouble processing what was going on.
Dad, that's so cool. Can I do that? Teaches a lot about morals watching these movies. They're good for you.
Yeah, I don't know. How about you guys? Like, what's your favorite comic?
Favorite comic or like character or in our
collection? No, it doesn't have to be. Like, how about like a series? Like,
shoot,
like a run.
My favorite run? That's really hard to say, to be honest, because I've read like a good amount of things, but I don't know. I guess honestly, it may be skewing more recent, but I've been really impressed with Immortal Hulk all the way through. I know that obviously it's more of like a recency bias type thing, but it's honestly held up as like a hitter, like every issue for me. But I mean, other than that, like some of the best things I've read honestly stem back to like All-Star Superman, stuff like that. I mean, it's kind of hard to deny like its greatness and to say that many things are better than it. There's still so much for me to read, seeing as how I don't think I started collecting until like early 2014. So it's like I've got a lot of catching up to do, but that's probably it for me. What do you think, Joe?
My favorite comic book of all time is definitely All-Star Superman. So Juan got me hooked on Smallville, and I remember going to his house like all summer long, and we would watch that shit from daylight to dark. And
The
we
indoctrination program.
yeah, and the brainwashing and the cult I joined, and we went to
You
go
went to
see.
Superman conversion camp.
Yep. The Holy Trinity. And we finally watched Man of Steel, and that sucked. Well, it didn't suck. It wasn't Smallville. But All-Star Superman was the best comic book representation of that character, in my opinion. Well, at least what I've read so far. So that's my favorite. When you got me collecting, there was a lot of titles that I started off with that I still hold pretty fondly. New 52 was kind of a shit show, but Batman, that run on Batman was really, really good. Animal Man was really good. All-Star Western was really good. And then some stuff that we've read kind of recently for the pod. Like, I didn't realize I'd like Death of Superman so much. I knew Swamp Thing would have been good, but like that was just as good as I expected it to be. Berger got me hit to Preacher. It's one of my favorites as of late. And then you mentioned Gaiman earlier. And so I like Sandman too. That was a pretty good run. But lastly, you mentioned Moore as your favorite writer. Watchmen is probably the most iconic, overall best comic I've read as far as both writing and art goes. All-Star Superman's my favorite, but as far as like the best goes, I'd have to give it to Watchmen. So there's quite a few titles. I'm going to give it to All-Star Superman, but the medium is just so big because there's so many different writers, there's so many different artists, and they keep these characters that have been around for such a long time fresh constantly. There's always a new take on the character. So, I mean, there could be something that comes out 5, 10, 20 years from now. That's my favorite. So that's kind of the allure of the medium.
For sure.
Do you have any like collecting goals that you haven't reached, or like do you have like a any comic book collecting regrets?
Oh, tons of regrets, like 10,000 sitting in the basement. No, I mean, I love my comics. One of the sort of weird things I like to do is if on occasion my wife and kids are out of town, I like to get out the comic books and just kind of sort through them and organize and just kind of bask in how many there are and like literally rediscover things that like I was like, oh shit, I own this. Wow, that's cool. But in terms of like collecting goals, I want a complete run of Jonah Hex. Just Jonah, again, I always kind of like skewed towards Westerns. And I think because before actually like doing my own collecting, I was introduced to comics kind of hit or miss through flea markets and antique stores that my grandparents and mom would go to and occasionally like bring home floppies. And so I remember getting like this Jonah Hex, like, I don't know, it was like an annual or something like that, or like a 64-page spectacular. I don't know, something big, like a dollar comic back in the 80s. And I remember just reading the shit out of that thing, and one of the stories in it had Jonah Hex dying and being preserved as like a sideshow feature where they like, I don't know, mummified his body or something.
Like Walt Disney down in Cuba.
Yeah, exactly. And just imagine that stupid like scarred face of Jonah Hex with 2 revolvers, and like this is what I love about Westerns. Like people die in Western comics.
You like that?
Yeah, I do like because superhero comics typically like someone doesn't get like murdered, but in a Western you sure do get killed. There's this last panel, like this last, I don't know, set of panels in the book, and it kind of was trying to show how like the statue of Jonah Hex had like lost its allure and had been stored in like this like, I don't know, storage closet for years and years and years. And then like, like half a century passes and someone finds it and puts it back on display. And this little kid walks up to it. I shit you not. And Jonah Hex revolver goes off and blows his head off. The last panel. And that just like really like seared into my mind. Like, damn, Jonah's badass.
It's even cooler in Han Solo.
Right. right? Like that kid didn't do shit other than want to like see the sideshow freak.
So if you love Jonah Hex that much, do you have his first appearance?
I don't. I don't have his first appearance.
Is that one of your goals that you're planning to hit? Do you have other books that you want to get? Like, what are your top 3 like favorite characters, next collecting goals? When you got a little bit of side cash, you're like, I won't miss this. What kind of
you get a
looking at?
I think I want the, what is it? Hulk 180? Is that the cameo Wolverine? So I have 181.
That's a collecting goal.
Yeah, but I want 180. I want to say that I have all of the Wolverine.
I feel that.
So that's on top of my list. Anything Batman related, key wise, I want. I'm really into Jack Kirby books. I would love to have a full run of Commandy, just kind of like any of his like Fourth World stuff. I would love to have like every Batman comic from like 100 up. That would be great. That probably will never happen. I think too, like a lot of times what I do is when conventions are coming to town and they have like some headliners, I try to like pick up keys from those folks just so I can get autographs and signed copies and stuff like that.
Now on that, when you get an autograph, do you like it on the front cover? Do you want it on the back, the inside? Because
go ahead.
My bad. I've gone through it like for a few different creators and I've gotten them on the front cover, and I don't know, it kind of starts to rub me the wrong way after a little bit. I think that if I ever get things signed again, I might start going into like the inside cover or like the back. I don't know what it is. Like I already hate slabs and now I'm kind of weird on signatures. I mean, I got a signed Man Bat and stuff, but it's just like I'm getting real weird. I kind of just like a standard unsigned key nowadays. So I mean, how many signed books do you have, by the way? I only have a couple.
Yeah, I don't have like many, and I don't have many slabs. I think I have less than 10 slab comics. I go right for the front cover, and I think to your point on that, I think that is just sort of like a sign of the times, if you will. Because I definitely have comics that I've picked up in like dollar bins that have signatures on the credits panel, I guess is one way to put it, on the inside. I think that was like more of the thing at that time. Right? I think it ebbs and flows. Like there are certain decades where you're more likely to see cover signatures versus inside signatures. And then when collecting became more of like a business with like the certifications and stuff like that, I think that's when you start to see that question become more of a like how you pose it. Like, I don't know, where do you get it on the back cover? Or do you get it on the book at all? Right? Do you just get like a certificate or something like that?
How many like blank covers have you brought into like a Comic-Con? And do you remember that time where he ripped off Mr. David Finch?
Oh my God. Damn it. Why'd you bring that up? I think that's actually my only blank cover, and you should tell that story because while I was trying to pull a fast one, you ended up actually on the receiving end of it.
I left a big old stinky. And so I stood in line behind everybody else, and the guy in front of me asked for some like weird drawing, like 2 naked chicks wrestling, basically. And David's like, I don't know if I can do that. And his wife's standing right next to him, right? And I'm just like, and then he gets hit with a whammy, like a double whammy, because I come up next. I'm like, I'm a broke college student. Like, I can't even afford to be here. Like, can you do something for free? And I'm sure he cringed, dude. And whatever inspired him to say is like, if you come back tomorrow, I can mock something up for you. And it was just me being an asshole. And I'm like, okay. But I followed up on my on my bullshit. And I came back the next morning, and sure as shit, he did me the coolest Wonder Woman cover I've like ever seen. And they didn't even have like a good run on Wonder Woman, but he had a really, I mean, he was good with the pencils, very classic house style. The only thing that pains me is that after the very end, it was like so beautifully done. He's like, what was your name again? And I'm like, Joe. And he's just like, all right. And he wrote for Joe on the copy. And I mean, I wasn't going to sell it anyway, but I was just like, damn.
He says, don't teach your broke ass.
No, Now I really can't move it. So unless there's another Joe out there that collects comic books, yeah.
Mine's David.
Thanks, Dave. No, but stuff like that is why collecting's so fun, man.
Well, the funny thing is that you did that, and then I followed up right behind you and didn't get quite the great cover. He did do it for free, but God, man.
Lightning doesn't strike twice.
Why did we do that? Because we had like spent all our money on like, well, I had spent all my money on shitty like Fantastic Four back issues.
Well, there could be a worse investment, especially that old Fantastic Four stuff, even if it's not a key issue. Like the first 100 issues are pretty solid to own.
Yeah. Well, I think what I ended up doing, I bought, I think, the entire John Byrne run at that convention. So, yes, conventions are quite interesting for sure. I do definitely go in now and make sure I budget for art, but I also still enjoy the cosplay. Like, I don't like to do it myself, but I do like to check it out.
I did see a picture of me with that one chick with the missile titties. Do you remember that? You know what's funny is
which one? I mean,
right? Yeah, there was this one chick, and she was dressed up as God knows what. But I think you flagged her over and said, "Can you take a picture with my younger brother?" God bless you. And I showed a coworker the other day, and he's like, "Wait, that's from some anime." I'm like, "Bro, that wasn't the intent." So yeah, no, they stay interesting.
I miss the convention season for sure. The pandemic fucking sucks.
Yeah, dude, it torpedoed our plans to go to the Cherry Con.
Yes, holy shit, we had like hotel and
yeah,
I had a plane ticket and everything.
A literal year ago. Oh my god, I can't believe it's already been that long. I was so geeked, and then this shit hit the fan like right before. I was like, no way. I was geeked too.
That would have been trouble.
Yeah. Hey, we still have time to do it, boys. But well, I guess
players with your titties out. Watch out. The boys are coming.
The junkies are in town. Well, what kind of advice would you give to someone that wants to start collecting?
Ooh, I would say check out some like YouTubers who do reviews or podcasts, maybe like the Junkies.
Check out CBJ.
Yeah, and kind of get a sense of what might be interesting or what other people find interesting, and then go slow. Even though that's the exact opposite of what I did. I guess it just depends, you know. If you got a lot of fucking disposable income, just fucking go hog wild. You know, the thing is, like, if you find that one comic and, you know, that stupid Web of Spider-Man 64, it's just like that, whatever, I can't even remember. The cover is etched in my brain, but the story, remember it all. But it's like, whatever had happened, though, it was like, I need to know, right? It was like a soap opera at that point. I was like, I need to know what fucking happens to Spider-Man. I don't know. So nowadays, you have so many options. Maybe check out like where they do these like, what are they, like trade paperbacks now, where you can get like the first, I don't know what, like 6 or so issues at a time. That might be the way to do it. But if you're into like maybe trying to collect, do it the way we do it. Like read digital or trade and then collect keys.
Damn straight.
You don't want to end up with 10,000 comic books in your basement.
It's too funny.
I think that's good advice. But is there anything else? I don't even know where I'm going with this. I'm sorry.
There's always something else.
Anything we didn't mention.
Oh, how about this? Have you ever damaged a comic like on accident and just felt like horrible about it?
I have not, but Burger's got a story.
Bro, I don't even know how it happened. So get this. I'm scouring eBay. I'm looking for the biggest thing I can get, like bang for buck. I come across an Action Comics 242, a first Brainiac. And they said it was lower graded. So, it's a 1.8, it's a 2. And it presented like a 4. And I'm like, bet, say less. Send them an offer. It's a quarter under market. gets to my house. I get it. I put it in a new Mylar. I look at it, all attached, all perfect. Nothing wrong with the front cover. And then I leave it in my box. I don't know. I just didn't go back to check the box for a while. I get that little urge, that little tingle. I'm like, oh, I'm going to go flip through the box. So, memory lane. And it's the first book in my box. I pull it up. The tape off the back in the Mylar is up. Nobody goes in my room or went in my room. Nobody touches my shit. There's a little chip out the very top of the comic and like a little divot and like a crack. And I'm like, what the fuck? And I went around and I grilled everybody. Like, I was like, my mom, my brother, my girlfriend, anybody who could have came by. I was like, did you do this? Did you touch my book? Because I went, I opened it up. That little purple fleck of paper, nowhere to be found. It's gone. So I don't know what happened. I'm like, did a bug get in? Did it munch on it? Did somebody spitefully open my book and rip a tiny piece out of the very top? Like, why? Who would do this to me and why?
The funniest shit is the last time I was at your house and I was looking through your comic box, your girlfriend's like, yeah, he blamed me for that.
I was like, did I do something to you? And she got mad. She'd take a revenge because
she
knows that
would
would hurt me
too.
Yeah, dude, I was furious. I was like, there's no way. And it's just like you look at it and you're like, wow, that looks perfect. And then every day you don't even have the like explanation behind why. And you just look at it and you're just like, what's wrong with it? Why don't I love it as much now? And you just have like an OCD staring at it, just like laughing at me, bro.
Oh, that's shitty.
It's a nightmare.
God, I was leaving. There was this really cool local comic book shop out here in Vermont where I live now, and it was called Killer Rabbit. And the guy I'm still friends with, probably one of the cooler like comic book shop people ever. And he would always hook me up on like the store variants and stuff like that, or give me first dibs anyway. And I remember going in there and coming out with my plastic bag of comics with some variants, and they fucking slipped out of the bag into the parking lot on their corners and just bent the shit out of everything in my pull that week.
Oh no.
I was so pissed. And I know that I have had comics stolen over the years just because I've moved so often.
That's jank.
That is jank. I know for sure I had a first appearance Carnage that went missing just because I literally have that entire run of Spider-Man from that time, except for, of course, that issue.
I think Venom too. When I was over at your place and we're organizing them one by one, and it was every key issue was gone. And then back to the normal issues. Pretty messed up.
I think.
Damn it, Dan.
I know, right? Oh, he's Catholic. What do you expect?
He says the priest stole something from me. I'm going to steal from you.
I think one of my favorite things to do still is finding just that random ass comic. It doesn't even have to be worth a whole lot, but in like antique stores or just like, I don't know, weird stores where you don't expect to find comic books. That's where I found my first appearance, Rocket Raccoon.
Dope.
Right? For $1. I was like, holy shit. That's the kind of thing. I think that's probably my greatest find in an antique store, but I never give up hope. I love digging through dollar bins.
It's a thrill to chase for sure, because every antique store, you don't even know if they have comics, and when they do, it's like, oh, good, X-Force number 22. But when you find like that one diamond in the rough, like you can have way bigger books back in your box at home, but you feel like a champion when you have like that book in your hand. You're like, haha, losers.
Right. I always get really nervous. Like the person at the register is going to know for some reason, even though they don't know jack shit, but to be like, oh, they're going to like take it and not let me get away with underpaying for this comic book.
Well, when I go to antique stores, I don't tell them I'm looking for the comic books. When they ask me what I'm looking for, I'm like, I'll just browse around. And so when I find that comic book, I'm there.
Usually I find all those like romance comics in the antique store.
I actually haven't found anything good antique store, unfortunately.
Really?
No, nothing big or that significant. But when I was working one day, I had a customer I was talking comic books with, and she's like, I don't collect, but my husband does, and he hasn't done it for years. I'm sure he wouldn't mind giving you his old comics. I'm like, it's okay. And she comes by anyways, like a week or two later. I'm not even working that day, and drops off a whole stack of comics. And I thumbed through it the next day, and sure as shit, first appearance of Deadpool. Not even like a big fan of the character, and I'm kind of like, do I tell her that she just gave me her husband's first Deadpool, or do I keep it? And I won't tell you how that ended.
You keep that shit. And I hope she shows up next week in cosplay.
Oh, word.
All right. Well, anything else you want to pick my brain about?
If I had to add one thing, I guess like for people getting into comic books, I personally like to look for creative teams as of lately. Like as far as like my pull goes, if I know a certain writer or artist is going to be on it, I'll try and collect it. Otherwise, I really don't pay it any mind. Like honestly, I don't care what the title is. It could be a character I don't even care for, but if there's a certain writer or artist that I'm attached to, that's kind of how I've divvied up my pull lately. So like I like a lot of Jeff Johns, and even though he's not doing a lot of stuff lately, I guess that's kind of my pull to comic books. Anything that even I guess lately, because of the comic book podcast, we read Preacher, so anything Ennis or Dylan does, I might be interested in. And then I mentioned All-Star Superman's my favorite comic book of all time, so anything Grant Morrison does or Quitley, I'm interested in. So
yeah, I'll just give a shout out to Crisis. I love the DC Crisis. It doesn't matter what. Crisis on Infinite Earths, Infinite Crisis, doesn't matter. I love it all. And to me, that really informs, it's kind of like the underlying theme of all DC is crisis.
In one form or another, it kind of all leads back to that. At least Silver Age on, I want to say.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Bible of DC. When I read it, it was a little dry because it was so informative, but it's definitely important. Seriously.
Yeah.
Well, is there anything that you wanted to ask us, or any last thing you want to mention?
I don't know. What's like the best comic book movie you've seen or show lately? Anything good?
Best comic book movie? I haven't really seen too much lately. I mean, I finally watched Thor Ragnarok, the third one. That was just all right, dude. I just hate Mark Ruffalo being the Hulk. I don't even want to get into it right now, but I'm tired of his ass. And then, other than that, no, I don't watch WandaVision. Haven't watched Mandalorian. I haven't seen really anything that nerdy lately. I'm in the dark, bro. How about you, Joe?
That's tough. Lately, no, but that Watchmen TV series was actually pretty good. It was very progressive in the way that it built off of the last episode until it finally, like the last 3 episodes were so killer. I ended up buying like the first season. I don't think they're coming back to it, unfortunately. I heard rumors that they might do like a season of V for Vendetta next because Alan Moore, did Watchmen and V for Vendetta. I know. But outside of that, nothing new.
Did either of you watch Utopia?
No.
Okay.
What is that?
Was it?
It's a show on, I want to say Netflix, where it's like there's this group of comic book nerds who are into this comic book called Utopia. And is it Utopia or Dystopia? I think it's Utopia. I know the show's called Utopia. And it's like this cult following. And all of a sudden, like these people buy this home, and in the home are kind of like rough drafts of the sequel to Utopia. And the interesting thing about it is that the comic so it has like a cult following because it has like a conspiracy angle to it, and the people who are into it think that it details all of like the major like viruses and plagues that have like climate crises that have sort of like befallen man. And so they're really into like finding out what's going to happen next. And then what they find out is that everything in the comic book is real. And they kind of get sucked into this, like, I don't know, like Cloak and Dagger kind of storyline. I don't know. I liked it. It was kind of campy, but shit, I was in the Smallville. What do you want?
For sure. Joker was good.
Joker was great.
And I liked Into the Spider-Verse a lot more than I thought I would. I was a little
Same.
turned off by like the animation at first, but running it from beginning to end, it was actually very solid. It was one of the better Spider-Man stories like ever told. You guys know I'm a big Smallville fan. I think my favorite superhero movie of all time, though, unpopular opinion, it's going to be Batman Begins, though. Everybody likes the second movie, but I think the first movie was the best just because it came off as very comic booky.
How about The Crow?
Fuck yeah, I love The Crow.
Fuck yeah, dude. Fuck you, Joe, The Crow. But but other than shouting out The Crow, I actually forgot. I did just rewatch Blade 1 and 2, and those kick so much ass.
Oh, I'll have to check it. I'll have to rewatch them.
Wesley Snipes? Ooh, dude, he's got like the sick haircut and he's got the swords and the guns, dude. Daywalker, bro. And like they're doing like the little rave or whatever, and it's a bunch of pasty whites, and then the blood comes down out of the ceiling, and then oh shit, Blade's on. He just starts whooping ass. It's like that early 2000s camp in like cheese. Like it's like a thick block of cheese, but like you got to appreciate it for what it is, and it kicks ass. Don't watch the third one though. Third one can fucking eat shit.
It's that bad, huh?
Yeah, Ryan Reynolds is like a supporting character in it, and it's just tonally different from like the first two, which is sick.
Speaking of like shitty movies, the original Dolph Lundgren Punisher, I really like that movie still.
Hell yeah.
And there was, oh god, who did that? They did like 2 more Punisher movies.
Thomas Jane?
Yes.
Yeah.
What was the second one? The second one, was it like Warzone?
Something like that. I think it was, yeah.
That shit was fucking awesome.
It popped off for no reason. Yeah, those movies are sweet. I remember watching that one with my dad. I was like, why are we watching The Punisher with you? But, it was cool.
That's that's what I'm saying. Like comics can be all over the place. So it's like whatever you're into. And I gave up a long time ago trying to be one of those people like, oh, that doesn't follow that storyline exactly, or that's not what should happen. It's like I don't give a fuck. Just entertain me for a couple hours.
Couldn't have said it better.
I mean, if I want to read those storylines, I'll go read the comics, Like I know they're not the same.
Before we go, is there anything that you want to plug? Do you want to tell us your social media where people can find you if they want to follow you? Or, any shouts out to anybody that you'd like to give? Anything you want to plug?
No.
Completely anonymous.
I mean, my social media is really boring unless you're into vegan food pictures.
That burrito looked like a real hitter this morning.
Oh, damn.
Yeah.
That was good. That was good. The tofu scramble. Can't go wrong. And use the black salt so you get that sulfur taste.
Look at them taters.
I mean, not really. I mean, I haven't evolved much in terms of being cool since high school. Shout outs. I don't know. Give Dan a shout out. I won't give
Shout out Dan.
And then to you guys, the junkies. So I'm glad this happened. I don't regret not being a part of it every episode, but I'm glad to be here now, and I'm glad you guys are doing this, and I think it's fucking awesome.
Yeah, and as one of our guests, you're obviously welcome back onto the show, and when we ask, you're actually required to. So, you'll be making a future appearance someday down the road. So
we'll definitely be doing a trade review.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that'd be great. And then that way we can actually like dig in deep into like some storylines and kind of deconstruct some shit.
That would rule. Well, shoot,
Perfect.
That concludes pretty much our interview with a junkie, Juan Florencia. You know where to find the podcast. It's everywhere you listen to podcasts. You know where to find us on social media. It's at CBJ Pod on Instagram or at CBJ Podcast or Comic Book Junkies on Facebook. I know I was very straightforward last week, demanding, but I'll just ask again this week. I'll take my foot off the gas. Please leave us a review. Please tell your friends. Do it for us. Do it for any podcast you enjoy. They'd greatly appreciate it.
Little teaser for next episode in honor of my new comic book pickup, which you can find on our Instagram page. You can find on my page as well. well, I picked up a first appearance of Jean Grey as Dark Phoenix, and so in light of that, we'll be reviewing the Dark Phoenix saga.
Well, thank you guys. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, and thank you guys for listening.
All right, guys, till next time.